43 says, when they had fulfilled their days, they returned returned. The child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew of it. That's the most incredible story in the New Testament. Incredible why? That they'd been given the privilege of escorting Jesus out of a womb right to the cross, to the tomb, womb to the tomb, and they lost him. I thought they'd have had a bodyguard there day and night. When did they lose him? They lost him immediately they came out of church, just like you do Sunday morning. You'll have forgotten the sermon before you've gone 100 yards out of church, particularly if the Cowboys were playing. I think that's the greatest religion in Texas, football. They lost him. Why? They supposed he was in the company, and he wasn't there. Remember the resurrection morning? She supposed it was the gardener. She thought he wasn't there, and he was there. They thought he was there, and he wasn't there. Some people think if you build a gorgeous church and put stained glass windows, have a big pipe organ, and all the trimmings, that the Lord is there. Not so. Not necessarily. They supposed he had been in the company, and they sought him among their kinfolk, and they turned again. After 3 days, you know, you do pretty good. If you backslide and you make a recovery in 3 days, you're doing pretty good. Because don't backslide anyhow. They lost him and rediscovered him in 3 days. Where? In the temple. I imagine they searched every room. It was an enormous place. One part was the upper room. There were other rooms. They sought him with despair. And his mother went to bed. What do you think she did the first night? What would you do if you lost a 12-year-old boy? Cry yourself to sleep? Think it would be justified? You think you'd do it the next night too? And the next night too? He's not here. Or maybe those men that, you know, come every time down by the pool of Siloam selling goodly pearls, they've taken him away, stolen him. Finally they found him where? I imagine Joseph pushing the door of the sanctuary open and saying, he's there. Where? Isn't it amazing? A 12-year-old boy's up on the front row asking the wise heads questions. It says hearing. Does that imply he answered? Hearing and asking them questions. If you don't have a 12-year-old, you haven't yet discovered how ignorant you are. Oh, heaven, you people need to pray for extra wisdom. I mean, your boy's going to have a computer. You don't know what that means anyhow. It's like buying your husband a sewing machine for Christmas. Oh? I would have loved to have been eavesdropping to what questions he was asking. There'll be very wise questions, I'm sure of that. Do you think those wise heads ever forgot that youngster? Say, that's the boy that came in the temple that day and had us all puzzled and embarrassed us. I wish they'd lose him. I felt like that about some church members too, but... Sorry, I've lost a verse here. Go from that incident to another incident just as embarrassing, more embarrassing, in the 4th chapter. Verse 16, as his custom was, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. Why? That wasn't his job. It was the rabbi or the chief rabbi or one of the best of the priests. They delivered up to him the book of the prophet Isaiah, and he found a place. He found the place. I like that. He wasn't going to read anything, you know, that would not mean anything, so he wrote from the 61st chapter. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Do you wonder it closes the verse by saying, and the eyes of everybody there were upon him? I don't know what his voice was like. I'm sure it was majestic. Maybe it was that, even at that day, like the sound of many waters. What did he say? The Spirit of the Lord, verse 18, is upon me because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, something they didn't do. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering the sight to the blind, and set at liberty them that are bruised. You know, that upsets a lot of people today. Oh, they're saying one pious phrase, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If you mention healing, they think you're an idiot. Well, I happen to think that Jesus isn't crippled. I happen to believe that Jesus Christ has more power and authority now than he had in the days of his flesh. And he had dominion over death, he had dominion over lunatics, he had dominion over palsy. Do you wonder he embarrassed them? Oh yes, they said very piously, you know, they read the 35th chapter of Isaiah, when he is come, the eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped, then shall a lame man leap as a hart, the tongue of the dumb shall sing. He didn't read it, he did it. So he embarrassed them. The Spirit of the Lord is upon. You know, there's no greater thing this side of eternity. I'm sure, Paul, you believe in that too. Then a man can say, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I won't give you 2 hoots for all the degrees the preachers have. You can have 32 and still be frozen anyhow. I'm glad money can't buy this. There's no man can lay hands on you and give you the spirit of wisdom. I don't believe so. You can't buy it. You can't get it by climbing the intellectual ladder of education, getting some great degree in a university. God Almighty doesn't happen to read diplomas, and I'm not facetious in saying that. If you're going to be a preacher, covet this, whatever it costs you. If you have to fast 1 day a week, if you have to miss 2 nights in prayer, so what? When I was in my 20s, many times I wouldn't go to bed for 3 or 4 days. Stayed in the church after Sunday night service. Went to church Saturday night, had a street meeting till midnight. Went to the church wrapped up in a cloth and lay at the side of my books, my library there, to wait on God. Some of you have read, I'm sure, old Dr. Jowett. He was a good Englishman, of course, but anyhow. He coined a phrase I've thought of thousands of times. You have to bleed to bless. You have to bleed to bless. If the Son of God couldn't be a real true blessing as God wanted without bleeding, how can we? He came to do the will of his Father. A century back in Scotland, there were 3 famous brothers. Andrew, I think one was Andrew Bonar, and the other was, what was he called? Horatio Bonar. He wrote this lovely hymn, go labour on, spend and be spent, thy joy to do the Father's will. It is the way the Master went, should not the servant tread it still? Toil on and in thy toil rejoice, for toil comes rest, for exile home. Soon shalt thou hear the bridegroom's voice, the midnight cry, behold I come. Men die in darkness at your sight. I don't care if you work in one of the most fashionable, up-to-date computers. The man across the other computer's dying without God and without hope as much as the heathen up the Amazon. It's much more stirring to see stark naked people and Indians, isn't it? Dying in some rotten, uncivilized country. People in the Waldorf Astoria are dying without God tonight. They can't spend their millions. People in Washington trying to solve problems for the world can't solve their own marriage problems. Can't solve their own drinking problems. Can't solve their own gambling problems. We're led by idiots. This world will never be put straight till the Prince of Peace does it. You can be sure about that. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering the sight of the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the